Welcome to Broadway Corner with Ashley Ha, where you can hear your favorite performers talk about how they got started, their careers, and everything in between. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Spotify at Broadway Corner with Ashley Ha, and on my main Broadway account at Broadway_Corner on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to Broadway Corner with Ashley Ha. I'm so happy you are here. And today I'm back yet again with another Here Lies Love episode. And I'm talking to someone who I've seen in 3 different shows, who covers both Ninoy Aquino and Ferdinand Marcos, and is one of the kindest people I've met on Broadway. It is Erin Alcaraz. Hi, Erin.
Hello, hello, hello.
So happy to have you here. Obviously, I've known you for a little bit longer than, I've known other people in the cast. But yeah, I'm so excited to get to talk to you about your journey and about Here Lies Love today. So for a little bio background, Aaron is an actor based in New York City and Los Angeles, and he has been seen on Broadway in Mean Girls as a swing and Kevin G understudy, Off-Broadway in Trevor the Musical as Jack, and the national tour of Rent as Angel, and in the LA production of Invincible as Mercutio. And film and TV credits include Trevor the Musical on Disney Plus, Law and Order, Organized Crime, and The Equalizer. Aaron is a graduate of Ithaca College, where he received his BFA in musical theater. And as an actor, Aaron loves to give his characters a voice so that their stories can be told. And his mix of an open-hearted and earnest storytelling with a quirky, eccentric, and I can't pronounce. Okay, that's too hard for me to say right now. Bring an endearing and relatable quality to his performance. Then Conrad Ricamora meets Maulik Pancholy, which I don't know if you wrote that before or
That's
after
funny.
you were in the show.
Oh my gosh, that's funny that that's still up there
Was that
because
when did you write that?
I wrote that in the pandemic. I guess we're jumping right in. I took an acting class in the pandemic via Zoom with the Leslie Kahn studio in Los Angeles. Shout out to Leslie. Um, and whoever goes to the studio has to go through their like beginner classes first. Like there are a few classes you have to do before you can study just like in general scene study classes. And in the first one, they try to put in like things about like marketing yourself and all these things. And one of your assignments was to come up with a log line. And log lines are used a lot of the times when like people are selling scripts and stuff where they're like, oh yeah, my show is like think Friends meets The West Wing. Oh, that would be a really interesting show. But yeah, like it's a way to like put in people's mind like a specific image already, like right off the bat. And I've been a fan of Conrad since I was in college. And so yes, that has been my log line since the pandemic. And I that's so funny. I forgot that that was still up there. But yes, now I
Yeah.
work with him every day.
I know. I read it and was like, wait, when did he write that? Because
Yeah.
it's so perfect now that you're literally covering Conrad's role now, like the role that he originated, which is incredible that,
I picked the right person for my log line. Yeah.
yeah, you really did. You really did. I mean, maybe one of the Here Lies Love people looked at your website and was like, "Oh, I see." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe in their heads they did that. Yeah. And anyway, he feels a responsibility as an artist to bring truth, joy, and life to every role, so that audiences can relate and see the world from a different perspective. Which honestly, I think is kind of the perfect way to talk about you, especially in Here Lies Love, because that is kind of what Here Lies Love does, is that, audiences, whether you're Filipino, non-Filipino, you see the world from a different perspective that maybe you didn't know before, and then, you learn more about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, hi Erin, it's awesome to see you again. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It is a beautiful, when we're recording this, it's a beautiful Monday here in New York City. Um, yeah, it's a nice day off. I'm excited to get to talk to you.
Yes, thank you so much. And just kind of getting right into it, like, can you talk about your background, kind of where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you discovered theater?
Yeah. So I am born and raised in Los Angeles, California. And I was an only child, grew up with my parents in LA, and I grew up loving to sing. I always loved to sing, even when I was like a really, really little kid. Like even before I could talk, I was like singing gibberish. And my parents, I feel very lucky. My parents kind of recognized that I was so drawn to music from an early age. And so once I started getting a little older, like I took piano lessons, I like did a smattering of other instruments, but piano was the main one that stuck. I sang at church, I sang like in school choirs and talent shows and stuff like that. I knew that Broadway existed, but growing up in LA, it's not necessarily a theater town very much. So I knew that Broadway existed, but I grew up listening to like the radio and Whitney Houston and Celine Dion and like stuff like that. Um, and when I got to high school, um, I don't know how this shift happened. I was a sophomore and there wasn't a theater department at my high school. I went to a public high school called Eagle Rock High School in LA. And I had started getting more and more into musical theater kind of on my own time. YouTube was on the rise at the time. And so I would be looking up clips from the Tonys and different things. And I was so impressed. This was around the time when auto-tune was really big. And
Mm.
so I'm aging myself. When auto-tune was really big. And so I was so drawn to musical theater performers because it, especially at that time, to me, it was so impressive that not only were they singing live, but they were doing it like 8 times a week while acting and dancing and, so many things all at the same time. And it was around this time that we just got like a random flyer from the local children's theater company, um, inviting people to like see if they wanted to be a part of the production. And so that was my first time like really getting to be a part of like a real musical. I was in the ensemble of High School Musical. Um, and I kind of got the bug from there. I did that first show the second half of my sophomore year. So this is like from like January to May. And then starting in the summer, I signed up for a second show with them, which was The Wizard of Oz. And this theater group, I think they changed their name now. I think it's Theater Experience of Southern California. They were great. They had multiple like regions that they did in LA, and I was in the Pasadena region. And they started this program called the Ambassador Program, which it allowed um, their um, their students to audition and be part of this kind of like smaller performance troupe where like other times during the week outside of your region's rehearsals, you'd come together and learn like group numbers, you'd have acting lessons, singing lessons, lessons about the business, and then we would also perform at different events around Southern California. And so I remember being really, really nervous and shy because I was actually a really, really shy kid, and I had just started theater, but the director really saw something in me and encouraged me to audition, even though I'd already missed the deadline. I was too scared. And he was like, no, 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 we're gonna have another audition. You're gonna audition, do it. And so I like found a random monologue on Google and like did it and sang, and I got in, which is very kind. And that's really where my understanding of what acting was began. And it was during that same summer when In the Heights, the first national tour, was touring around America. And they got to Los Angeles, and my director, after one of our rehearsals, was like, "Hey everyone, just a PSA. In the Heights is in its last week here at the Pantages Theater. If you haven't seen it, you have to go. It's so good." And so I went home and convinced my parents to get a ticket. And so we went, and I remember we somehow got really great seats. I'm not quite sure how that happened. I remember I knew nothing about the show. And it was the first time where I was seeing a story centered around people who looked and sounded like me. And not only that, but the show itself, there isn't necessarily like a protagonist and an antagonist. It would like all these like super huge things happening that like move the plot forward just for moving the plot forward sake. Like it was like a snapshot of life at these real people living in Washington Heights. And it just felt so real and accessible and relatable to me. I left that theater mind blown. And it was that night I got back home and I told my parents that I wanted to pursue theater and acting for a living. It literally was the night that I got back from in the Heights. And we just talked about Conrad, but my Nina was Miss Ariel Jacobs. And I remember thinking that she was incredible. And I've already fangirled to her now that I work with her at Here Lies Love. But it was just so full circle for me because that show really did change my life because that's what made me want to do this professionally. Um, and so then I started looking into colleges, and up until that point, I was going to be like a doctor. So I really
No,
didn't.
same, literally same.
Yeah. And like I don't know your background when it comes to like getting into theater, but because I did children's theater and my high school didn't have a theater program, I didn't necessarily have people to ask about like how do I apply for colleges? What are all these things? And so I did my best, but like there are school like I missed pre-screens because I didn't know they were a thing. Like all of these things that like took some schools out of the running, but I ended up getting into Ithaca College, which had ended up being my first choice anyways, because I had toured the campus the summer before my senior year of high school and loved it. Ithaca is beautiful, or Ithaca is gorgeous for anyone out there who knows that pun. Um, but I loved it so much. The people I met there during my tour were so kind. I loved that they advertised themselves as a program that put acting first. Like, yes, you have to sing, yes, you have to dance, but like it all comes down to acting at the center of it. And so that's what really drew me to them. And I also was and still am a fan of like Jeremy Jordan and Aaron Tveit and Ben Fankhauser, and they all had gone to Ithaca. So I went there for 4 years and it was wonderful and very challenging. And a lot of my closest friends that I still have, I met during those 4 years. And yeah, and then I went off to work from there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
That was
that's
a long, that was a long story.
but yeah, so it's so nice hearing about your journey from shifting from maybe medical to which is I think what a lot of us do. I know when I was
Yeah,
my dad's a doctor, so I was like,
my
I want
mom's
to be a
my
doctor.
mom's a nurse, so like
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's just like you think you're on that path and then you kind of shift a little bit. And like I mean technically for me one of that show that like you saw and then you're like okay maybe turned you into fan or turned you but I think when I started getting into like really performing it was like Mean Girls that was like one of
Yes,
my
yes,
shows which you
yeah.
were in for as a swing up until up until the pandemic and I remember like seeing like Ashley Park and seeing like Riza Takahashi and like everyone else in the cast who was Asian and I was like, okay, this is really cool how there's more people like me and
Yeah.
seeing you and I remember there was that one picture where you guys are all on the
On
stairs.
the staircase. I was just about to
Yeah,
bring it
yeah.
up.
It was
Yeah.
like all the Asians in the cast and I remember seeing that and I was like, okay, this is awesome. And it really helped propel me forward on a lot of stuff. That was like one of my first like big obsession shows.
Oh,
Um,
I'm so glad. I didn't know that. I'm so glad
yeah.
you did that.
I
That
know,
was
it's
a
definitely a good
that
one.
was something that yeah, that was something I loved about being a part of that cast because the student body of that school was so diverse, especially when I was there. And I remember that was my Broadway debut, so walking in and feeling like I wasn't like an other in the space was so encouraging to me, and it made it less scary and less daunting.
Mhm.
And it also made me proud to be a part of the show too. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
so glad that that was that for you. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it definitely was. I was obsessed with Mean Girls, as many people my age were at the time. But I mean, I know I see pictures where you still wear like your robe that you have.
I
It's
do,
the Mean
I do.
Girls
That's my
robe.
robe at my current theater. Yeah.
And just like, that was I mean, when I first got introduced to you and who you were as a performer, and then saw you in Invincible here, in LA, and then just seeing you go from there to like Here Lies Love now. It's like that is just so cool to see when you can follow, a performer through their career is definitely something that I love. I love seeing just you succeed and you shine really doing what you love so much. And since this is your first time being in Here Lies Love, like how did you get involved? What was your audition process like? Like when did that all start for you?
Yeah. So I didn't get to see it when it was off Broadway at all, because I was still in college when that was happening. And I'd heard about it. And I knew loosely that it was about Imelda Marcos, but I didn't know anything else. Um, and so then the years pass and I graduate and I'm working and the pandemic happens. And I think it was while I was in LA for Invincible, actually, when not to get him in trouble, if this would even get him in trouble, but there was one. I followed Conrad because again I've been a fan of his for years, and he posted a story on Instagram in front of the Broadway theater. Like it was a selfie in front of the Broadway theater. And he just wrote like home. And then the music that was playing in the story was Here Lies Love. And I was like, is this an unofficial announcement? Is the show coming to Broadway? And so, funnily enough, that was my first little like, maybe this is something I need to look out for. And I almost even messaged my agents right then. I was like, hey, I think there might be a rumor this is happening. Please be on the lookout. But then I can't remember exactly when the press release came out, but eventually, either late December or in January, they released the announcement that Here Lies Love was coming.
Hmm.
And that's when I did email my agents being like, hey, I don't know what it'll take to get me seen, but I need to be seen for this show. And I don't usually do that. A lot of actors have different relationships with their reps, and you're very much, depending on your relationship, you're very much allowed to like ask to go in for different things. I try to trust that they're already doing all they can and they know the things I should go in for, and that they have my best interests in mind. Um, I can only remember making requests like that twice, and once was Invincible,
Mm.
and the other was Here Lies Love. So I'm not to brag, but I have a pretty good track record in knowing what I should
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Also, to give them credit, in both cases, they'd already submitted me by the time that I had asked. So
Oh,
again, I
yeah.
trust that they know what is best for me. Um, but yeah, I after the pandemic, I had become kind of like an accidental vacation swing for the Mean Girls tour, which was really fun to get to like fly out to them whenever they needed some support. And I was in LA subbing at the Pantages Theater um, when I finally got my audition breakdown and my audition appointment for Here Lies Love. And Mean Girls even had asked me to extend. I was only there for like a week and change. And they asked if I wanted to move on to the next city with them just as some extra offstage support. And normally I would have said yes, but Here Lies Love was so important to me that I said, hey, like, thank you so much. I normally would love to help, but there's this audition and this show that I really, really, really want to make sure I do a good job in. So I have to pass. And so I came back to New York and I auditioned all through February. I went in 7 times total.
Mm.
And initially, I was in as ensemble to cover Aquino. That was like my track that I was in for. And so I was only doing Aquino material whenever I would go in. And even at the beginning, it just felt so good. Especially especially when you're an understudy. Um, I don't know if other people feel this way, but like as actors, like of course we can do so many different things and stretch to be different people. And it doesn't always feel like a super great fit, even though you're able to do it, of course. But even when I was going in for a keynote and still auditioning, I was like, wow, this material feels really good. I'd love to be able to, do this. Um, and so I kept getting called back. And as I kept getting called back, they kept adding material for different characters to see if I could um, understudy those as well. By the time I was at my final sing and read appointment, I was in the room for over 20 minutes because I just had so much material that I had to do. But everyone was so kind. Alex Timbers, our director in particular, was always so kind whenever I came into the room. Casting, Tara Rubin casting was incredible. It was a really like seven times is a pretty grueling process. But it didn't feel, like a slog. They really made that process, in my opinion, feel very welcoming. And I just, it was already a great experience in the audition. I was like, I really need to get this. And then I waited about a week. And I remember the day before I got my call, they announced that Lea Salonga was going to be a special guest star in the cast. And again, well, maybe not again, I haven't said this yet. I've loved Leia since I was a kid. Like there are videos of me as a kid singing along to Leia Salonga, and
Oh,
I've never gotten to meet her. I'd never seen her in anything. Um, I've never been in the same room as her. Like I've just always been such a fan. And so they announced that she was going to be in the cast. And I saw that, and I remember taking a screenshot of the Instagram post and texting my friends and saying, if I don't get this show, yes, I'll be disappointed, but what will break me is not having to be able to be a part of a show with Lea Salonga when I was like this close. But then I got my call the next day, and it was great.
yay. No, that is so, I mean, I know I was talking to Tim about like manifesting, but like just the fact that you're like, I have to get that, you're just so set on it. And especially because of, Leia is kind of the inspiration for not
Oh
just
my God.
Filipino, but like all Asian kids, especially me, like
Yes.
just growing
Yeah.
up, you know who she is. You definitely know who she is. You know what she's done, and you just want to, you want to be like her. Um, and this was
Yes.
my first time seeing her in person as well, like actually performing. And so yeah, oh my gosh. And 7 times going in is quite a lot. Especially for auditioning, and that's learning material with such a fast turnaround. I mean, that is in itself like so hard, and the fact that, that you were able to do that and just get through it, and you prepared, you did that, you auditioned, and then it all just kind of fell into place. That is, that's the best feeling when auditioning is like fun and not, not
Yeah.
something that you have to do necessarily. Yeah, now you're here. Now you're on Broadway again in the, your first time in an original show. I mean, I think everyone I've spoken to so far, it was their Broadway debut in the show. And for you, you've already, been there, done that, been on Broadway before. And so what was it like returning to Broadway, but in an original show that means so much to you?
It's been really, really special. And this is my second show. But being on Broadway, it just doesn't get old. And I hope that stays that way, like I think everyone like being on Broadway is such a special privilege that I don't take it for granted any single second of any day. And the way that Mean Girls closed was disappointing because we closed in the pandemic because of the pandemic. And I was lucky that I got 8 months with them and I had a really, really great time. But not being able to actually close and like feel like we had wrapped things up, and not being able to say goodbye to everyone or say goodbye to the building, like that was hard. And I wanted to be back on Broadway. I didn't know how or when it would happen, but I just kind of kept my head down and kept working hard and auditioning. And to get to be back in a show that is so special culturally, but also special in the sense that it's pushing theater forward, and I get to be in the original cast of it. Like that's a new experience for me. I know it's my second Broadway show, but it's my first time getting to open one on Broadway. And I already love being a part of original works in general, and getting to help create what ends up being on the stage. It I don't have any word. I'm just so thankful. I'm so happy to be a part of the show and to be where I am. I pinch myself every day. I'm so thankful. Yeah, it's been really, really special.
I mean, how can you not be when you're on Broadway and you're living your dream now? That's like what every little kid, you know, wanting to pursue theater is you dream of doing that, and you're now there. So it's you know, I'm so happy for you. Serious, like honestly, just so thrilled that you're back. I remember seeing you posting about it. I was like, of course, like of course you're gonna be, you know, coming back and doing Here Lies Love. You know, which again is so special. And do you have a favorite moment in the show, like whether it be on stage or it could be off? Like really, it doesn't could be anything you want.
Mm. I mean, there are too many favorite backstage moments to mention. I um I've always been a big proponent. Like I take my job very seriously. Like I think it's a privilege to be on Broadway, and I don't think that should be taken for granted. So I mean, honestly, even if I'm not doing a show on Broadway, like I it means a lot to me to be able to get to do what I do. And so I care a lot about my job and making sure that I do a good job. But with that being said, I also think it's very important to come at it with like a sense of fun and a sense of play and a sense of shared love with everyone around you. And so I've always wanted to like have fun at work. And honestly, Mean Girls helped me with this in a sense because that cast, especially when I was there, was so fun. And like a lot of us were like on the younger side. And so there were so many backstage bits that would happen every show, like whether it was like, oh, we fist bump at this time, or we high five at this time, or like we like have a little dance at this moment. Um, I've always found that fun, especially after Mean Girls and seeing that professionals can do it too. And so here at Here Lies Love, I find moments to like have a little bit with like our crew backstage. Like I have bits with our sound people, I have bits with like my dressers, and it all happens at specific moments during the show. And so those are fun little things I look forward to. On stage, there, oh, I get really emotional whenever we have a lot of Filipinos in the house. I we want everyone to come and see the show, and the show is for and accessible to everyone. But it is extra special when we see Filipinos seeing their story being told by other Filipinos. I'm getting emotional thinking about it.
Mhm.
And so later on in the show, when we are finally at the People Power Revolution, and when we sing God Draw Straight, those are very special moments for me. Again, especially when we have a lot of Filipinos in the house and I see them throwing up the Laban sign with us.
Mhm.
Ah, my God, it like literally like that's when I like get so extra thankful that I get to do what I get to do. Um, but just another like fun moment is I'm off stage at this point getting ready to enter, but we have a song called Poor Me in the show. And it's a little after halfway. And Imelda is confronting her husband, Marcos, and she says some lines in Tagalog.
Yes.
And And I feel like with the way that she says them, you can kind of get a sense that they're insults. And so like people can follow along no matter what. But especially after the first line that she says, depending on how big a cheer or a laugh or what have you comes after that, that's how I get a sense of how many Filipinos are in the house for that show. And
Yeah.
it's a fun little game. It's me and two other cast members, Roy and Jay. We're like waiting to make our entrance off stage, and we're always listening for that like reaction after. And that's a fun little moment that I love every
Yeah.
show.
No, I know exactly which one you're talking about. I no,
Yeah.
I remember like after seeing the show, I think either the first time I don't remember which time I looked it up and I was like looking in the lyrics like on online and someone had like annotated what it is and I was like, "Oh my God." Like it's so funny because like the first time you see it, if you're not Filipino or you don't know Tagalog, you're just kind of like you're like laughing, but you're like, I don't know why I'm laughing. And then you look it up and
Yeah.
oh, I see exactly what's going on. And is that again, that's like hilarious moment in the show. And do you have a favorite costume to wear? Because there's a lot of really good ones in the show.
There are a lot of really good ones. For me in my, I'll say my normal track, I really love my Child of the Philippines outfit. I think it's so cute. We have that short sleeve white button up with our tie and suspenders and those like fake glasses that we wear. And I have those like they're really snug, but I have these like skinny jeans that I wear. I just think it's a really cute look. It's a really fun number. Um, I really enjoy that outfit. And then the other outfit that comes to mind, and granted, I haven't gone on for my other covers yet, but I love Aquino's all white outfit. I think it's so, I don't know, recognizable and iconic, and
Yeah.
I think it's really cool to wear. I am extra cautious. I'm a very clumsy person. And so, especially when I've been on for a keynote, I know you'll see anything that gets on that white suit. Like you'll be like, oh, he like spilled on himself. So I'm extra careful whenever I'm wearing that white suit. I'm like tiptoeing around backstage. But
No,
it is
that's
really
yeah,
cool.
that's such a iconic. I remember seeing before I knew anything about the show, I'd seen like a picture of just Conrad like with a mic, and that was like the
Yeah.
image that I had in my brain, um, when I didn't know anything about the show. And like it makes me, it reminds me of like I've always thought about Regina and Mean Girls when she has the all white too. I'm like, man, they've got to be so careful with that. Like
I
kind of
think
the
about
same
that actually. Yes. Yeah.
same thing of like the Sioux is so it's just pure white, and so you have to be really careful.
So
Yeah,
careful. Because even like Conrad has, or I should say Aquino has a couple of really nice like moments where he's off stage. So it's a chance to like get a breather, like get a drink, all these things. And when I've been on, like I'll like you know, be sitting for a little bit, warming up more, and then I'll like use the restroom and like wash my hands. And I have to even be careful that I don't get like water splatter on the suit because I'm like, it's not gonna dry in time by the time I run out. Yeah, no, I'm just extra careful with anything I do. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You kind of have to be with that one. Um, and yeah, talking about Aquino, like, what has it been like going on for that role? I have a friend, Aaliyah. She's seen the show like
Yes, I
I've
know
seen it like
Leah.
yeah, I'm like 14 times or something now. I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
She met and I met through like K-pop on Broadway, which she saw like 20 times too. I'm like
Oh,
I can't
nice.
believe it. But yeah, she saw you twice in the role and she was just like, you know,
She
gushing about
did.
how good you were and I'm so jealous because I was not in New York um at the time because like yeah, again, it was just that one week.
Yeah,
So yeah, what has it been like going on? You went on very early in the process too of previews, I believe.
good.
And then you've
Yeah,
gone on quite a bit actually, like after that too.
yeah. I so like I said, this is my first time originating a show on Broadway. And so when I did Mean Girls, I was a swing. And so I really had to learn how to cover multiple roles and like learn how that worked best for me. But even in that sense, Mean Girls had been open for 2 years already. And so like the show was set. I just had to kind of go through my tracks and learn what had been set for 2 years already, as opposed to Here Lies Love, where not only were things shifting, especially once we got into the theater and we're teching and doing previews, but I also was an onstage track, so I couldn't just be watching all the time. I had to learn what I was doing first and then hope that like I would get my stuff down fast enough to like look over and like see what my other covers were doing. And so I had already been told during rehearsal that like yes, I cover more than just Aquino, but for the purposes of just trying to make sure that everyone had someone who could go on to like make sure that if I knew anyone, that I knew Aquino. And so whenever I wasn't in a number and like could watch, like I'd make sure that I was watching what Conrad was doing. I Yeah, it was just like as much watching as I could do. And then it was our second week of previews, and we started having some people get sick here and there. And so people even before me had already started going on.
Hmm.
They were like our swings had been going on and our alternate had gone on. And there was a day where we had to not make any tech changes during our rehearsal because our Imelda alternate was going on for the first time and it wasn't announced. It wasn't like a set date. And so we had the day. And so instead of making changes to the show, we were able to use the whole day to give JG an actual put in, which was really great. And like it's always great when covers have the appropriate rehearsal to be able to do their job well.
Yeah.
JG kills it every time that she's on. Um, but because we'd already had some surprises in those surrounding days, our associate director came up to Roy and I actually, and he was like, "Hey, just because it seems like we might need y'all earlier than like perhaps would be ideal. Since this is a rehearsal put in anyways, how would you guys feel about stepping out of the put in and Roy, you trail Jose doing Marcos and Aaron, you trail Conrad doing Aquino?" And I was like, oh my God, yes, please. So, because I already had a pretty good idea of what he did on stage, but that was just from my vantage point of wherever I was in my normal track on
Yeah,
stage.
yeah. Well,
And I had no idea what he did backstage, especially because we just moved into the theater like 3 weeks earlier. And so that was a really like clutch day for me because I got to follow him everywhere. He was so nice, answering any questions I had. I actually got to like stand in the pit and watch him when he was on stage. Um, and literally later on that week, like days later, I made my Aquino debut. So it kind of happened just in time, and I'm very thankful that that happened. But that's like the rush of live theater, especially as a cover, is you never know when you're gonna have to go on. And again, I'm really thankful for my swing experience with Mean Girls because I learned so much about what it takes to cover and giving yourself grace and not beating yourself up about the little things and remembering like they're the whole performance that you're trying to do.
mhm.
um, and so I feel like I've learned how to handle that stress in a good way. But I definitely was stressed. I went on, we were able to rehearse. I like had walked through the show in the lobby with our associates. And then right before the show, we were able to run some things on the set just so that certain moments wouldn't be my very first time doing it. And I got to request what things I wanted to make sure I put my hands on and feel. But then other than that, my first time ever doing the track was in front of a full house of people. And I think it went well. It was a really good night. But yeah, I've been on, as of this interview, I think I've been on 7 times
Seven.
currently.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is pretty. You're still so early in the process of the show and doing it. You guys have been open for a few weeks now, and yeah, I'm so grateful that like you had time to trail for Conrad because I've been asking everyone about like backstage traffic. It's insane first of all. And so yeah, so glad that you got to had time to do that because Conrad's not just playing Aquino, he's in ensemble a couple times doing other things like that you don't even notice unless you like look at his face and you're like,
He's
there,
like
I
kind
see
of
it. Yeah.
hiding his hood, but he's
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Because I couldn't see that when I was in the rear mez. I could only see that obviously when I was on the floor, and I was like, "Oh, I see what he's doing when he's not on." And yeah, it's like all those little moments that you don't even notice that he's in
Yeah,
the cast and doing all that stuff. So, yeah. And what has it been like telling his story? Because Aquino is a very, important figure in Filipino history.
yeah.
And I think that I saw one of the family members of Aquino got to see the show, and you were on for that track at that
Yeah.
time. So, what was it like telling his story, especially with family members of his present?
Yeah, that was really special. Anytime I get to go on for a keynote, it's an extra special and emotional show for me. Like you said, he is a hugely respected and hugely inspirational figure in Philippine history. And like our show kind of goes through the story of the rise and fall of the Marcoses, but really it's a story of the Filipino people, and that's why we end with the people power revolution and how like the Filipinos, um, you know, take back their country basically. And this is history, so like not really a spoiler, but Aquino was a huge contributing factor to all of that happening. And so I always take it really, really seriously, especially he has a lot of speeches that he gives.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those speeches are so charged for me because he, as an audience member, the audience is supposed to simulate being the Filipino people
Yeah.
experiencing, like kind of loving the Marcoses at first, and then as more of their atrocities start to come out, you're like, what? Wait, what? Like you literally like you get more and more horrified as the show goes on. And just like in real life, like the character of Aquino in the midst of this is the one who's saying like, no, no, like I know that all of these shiny things are happening, but all of these other things are actually happening. So those speeches are always very important to me and very charged, because I feel like it's really important that in the midst of everything that's happening, that the audience actually hears these words and starts to realize, oh, wait a second, like I didn't realize, wait, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yes, his name is Patrick. Patrick Aquino came to see the show, and I didn't know he was going to be there. I just finished two shows as, as a keynote, and I was signing at the stage door after the second show, and I got to him, and he was kind of visibly emotional, and he was like, "Hi, I'm actually a descendant of Ninoy Aquino, and I just wanted to thank you for your portrayal." And then I got emotional. And we took a picture together, and we still message here and there. He's so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he told his dad about the show, and that he told him how much he loved it and how much we do our best to really honor the memory of Ninoy. And yeah, that was a really special moment. And really special because, again, that was a day where I found out that morning that I was going on. That wasn't planned. So the fact that I got to do it for him was really, really special for me.
Yeah, no, that role is just it's definitely a tough role because you're going through his whole life pretty much and I remember seeing the Fabulous one the first time with Conrad and just being so blown away by that song in particular because it really is just pointing out all of those things that Imelda's doing and then you're at the end you're all chanting rise up with him and like pretty much yeah it does emulate the Filipino people at the time. I remember being on the floor, that's what you really it's so evident how what you're supposed to feel and I know some people are a little confused on who to root for or what they're trying to think, but I think that's kind of like the beauty of the show is that they were so the Filipino
Yeah,
people, they were like, who are we gonna, root for and
yeah.
support and politically, and whether it be Aquino or Marcos, like, it's your choice. And I remember especially seeing riots and bombs. I remember the first, like, seeing it on the floor. Um, it was really overwhelming because it's like you can't see anything too, because there's like all this smoke coming at you, and it's just chaos pretty much, as if you were in that situation. Um,
Mm.
and just the fact that they are able to do that with the show and kind of show you what it would have been like back then a little bit. um it's just so powerful. And then you see a Kino story, and most everyone kind of knows what's going to happen. You have that hope that it's not going to, but then
Uh,
it does, and then it's just that shock. And then, Leia comes out and sings "Just Ask the Flowers." It's just like an emotional roller coaster, really, of a show. You think of Most people,
yeah.
think See Here Lies Love as like a disco and a fun like dance party, but there is so much heart in the show, and I think that's what I really love about it, and what I take from it. And so, what do you hope the audiences will take home with them and learn from Here Lies Love?
It's that. It's basically what you said. Our director likes to call our show a Trojan horse, where you come for the party, and definitely the party is a big part of it, like symbolically, because like Imelda Marcos used to love going to discos and all that stuff. So there's that element. But also, like, joy is so ingrained in Filipino people. Like it, like I don't know how else to describe it. Like Filipino joy is such a thing. Even in the midst of revolution, like that was something that we learned during our like research process in the early weeks of this show, is like when we would see clips and pictures from the people power revolution, it wasn't all people, like in distress and like sobbing and like angry. Like they were out there and they were protesting and they were marching, but in the midst of that, they were playing music with each other and they were like laughing with each other. Like there was joy amidst the uprising and the sadness. And so that's a big important part of the show, is experiencing that Filipino joy
Yeah.
and that just like kind of like electric energy. Um, but what we're hoping that people take away from the show is, the heart that lies underneath it all, and the resilience of the Filipino people and the power of the people in general. We say this at the end, but democracy really is a fragile thing, and especially in an age where media is so easily manipulated in order to show or not show certain things. Like that was something that the Marcoses used back when they were in power and running for power. It was the way they presented themselves in campaigns and like all these things. Like they put out, like propaganda films about themselves. They like changed their backstories. Like
Yeah.
that was what they fed. Like they fed disinformation into the public. And that was before like Instagram and Twitter, and now it's so easy for it's easier for real information to hopefully be, uplifted, but just as easy for disinformation to be spread in this day and age. And so we're trying to share an important part of history, um, and uplift, these Filipinos who stood up for democracy and their country. But it is also a cautionary tale moving forward of, what um, what are the threats that are still posed to democracies all over the world. And like just because someone might seem like this like shiny thing that you're like, oh my gosh, like they're so great, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the full picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with, mentioned in the show how Imelda Marcos' son is literally the president right now,
Yeah.
and how that has changed because at first, Cory Aquino is president, and I believe their son too, and then
Mhm.
now it's like going back to the Marcos regime. It's kind of something I think David Byrne was talking about how it's way more, it's much more impactful now too
Yeah,
because of that, because the time that it originally was produced, it was, you know, with different people in power. Um,
yeah.
and what that means too to everyone who is going to be
And
seeing it. Just
and
knowing,
and yeah, and there's that aspect of it as well. But like even this isn't explicitly stated in our show, but towards the end of the Marcoses being in power, they held a snap election, and Ferdinand did not want to accept that he had lost, and
yeah,
he like just said, "No, I'm still the president," and he had his own little inauguration and stuff.
yeah,
And like especially now in 2023, like someone not wanting to accept the results of a democratic election feels unfortunately very familiar. Like that's still happening today. Um, and not just, in other countries away from here where we're doing the show on Broadway, like it it unfortunately still feels very present and a very real thing that's still happening in democracies all over the world.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, like I said, like it is a party and we want people to leave, you know, still feeling hopeful and uplifted and that they had a good time. But we also want to make sure they don't miss all the other things that we're trying to say underneath that
yeah,
part of this as well.
yeah, definitely. I know I didn't really know much about the show. I read all the history before seeing it, which I think helped too. But again, I didn't really get what the show is about yet until I saw it. And so it's kind of that one a thing where you have to see it to know it and to understand
Yeah,
it. And so
yeah.
that's why my hope. I mean, you guys have been selling out too, which is really great.
Oh, thank goodness.
And just being able to share it with so many people
Yeah,
and on one of the biggest stages in the world, Broadway, being able to share your experience and your culture's experience about um, really about history and what you're trying to prove so that we don't do it again, so that we don't
yeah.
repeat it.
I loved what you said about it. It is something that needs to be seen because there is an off-Broadway cast recording, and I don't know this. Hopefully, there will be a Broadway cast recording
I
as
know,
well.
I'm really hoping.
I would love that.
Yeah,
But even with that, like again, because of the really like genius minds behind this show and putting the show together, as well as how the like topic of disinformation is such a big part of the show as well. Um, that's why I say like the show needs to be seen because a character could be singing something, but the way that we stage it and the way that we have different graphics up actually point to what they're actually saying slash what is actually happening, if that makes
yeah,
sense. What the literal words being sung aren't always the real story when it comes to our show, which is purposely done. And I think it's really cool to be a part of something like this because it really does feel like a new piece of art that's happening. And I feel like for any sort of theater nerd, like to be a part of something like this is like crazy because like I went to college and like learned about all these like classic shows and like classic like show format and all these things. And then to be a part of something on Broadway, which is like one of the most commercial theater places in the world, and to be able to do something that is so not the norm is so cool.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. So
But again, it needs to be seen. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's again like what you were talking about. I've obviously been listening to the cast recording a lot, just because I'm so thankful for that too, that there is a recording of it. But you listen to it, you miss so much than that we would have seen. Obviously, because I've seen it, I get it. I know what is supposed to be happening. But to anyone who might want to get into it, it's a little bit harder. Like with Hamilton, you hear it, it's kind of exactly what you get everything from from those songs specifically, but with Here Lies Love it's so different than what you would even think or what you would even do with that song if you were just trying to imagine it. Like Hamilton, you imagine it and you're like, okay, this is exactly what I was thinking of. And then Here
Mhm.
Lies Love, you try to imagine it, and you're like, this is so different than what I was even expecting. Um, Within a show, just because of the complexity and really everything that comes with that. um yeah, again, it's such an innovative piece of theater, and it's breaking barriers and with casting, with but also just in Broadway history, because there's nothing like this ever ever being seen, and with an all Filipino cast, it makes it even more important. So what does it mean for you to be finally playing a Filipino in Here Lies Love? Because I believe you've never done that before in your
No.
career. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's most of us in the cast would say that probably. Um, it's so special because things are different now than when they were when I was growing up and even when I was in theater school. And like back then, it was like, oh, you're so ethnically ambiguous. That's amazing. And like, sure, at the time it was like, yeah, I guess I could get a job playing people that like I have no cultural like association with. But that's also like not all I want to do with my life. And I remember like being in college, and I had some moments where I was like, it was a very existential crisis for me, because I was like, I don't want to spend my career like only doing productions of like Miss Saigon or The King and I or Flower Drum Song. Not that there's anything wrong with being a part of those shows. It's just that I didn't want that to only be my career. Like I was like, I don't want Asians to only have to be in Asian shows, and not even just in Asian shows, but like playing a different Asian. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like for so long, that was kind of like the box that we were put in. And thankfully, like things have progressed since then, although of course, like always with, further to go. But it is so special to be able to, I don't know, have such a connection to the material. And this has been like, I remember, I think it was last year, I got like two or three co-star auditions in a row from my reps for like different TV shows. And they were like for like little bit parts for like a nurse or like other like small things. And I remember I got like three in a row one time where it said looking for a Philippine X performer. And I was like, is that a thing? Like I got emotional each time I got them because I literally never seen that on a breakdown before, like ever.
Yeah.
And it meant so much. And then to get to this show where we all are Filipino, and we all are Filipino on stage, but there are so many Filipinos backstage and on the producing team as well. Like it has felt so I don't even know how to describe it. I think I said once in an interview, like back when we started rehearsals, that this is like the most uh, genuinely myself that I felt since I was a kid.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe even not even since then, because like as you grow older, you like learn more about yourself and like become more confident in who you are. So it's that mixed with the like culture that I was immersed in as a kid, and now like all put together into this like wonderful life I get to lead right now. It's just so special. And I remember being in Mean Girls and hoping that like if there were like any other like little Asian kids in the audience watching me, that they'd be like, oh my gosh, like I could do that one day. Because that's what happened to me. Like I saw In the Heights, and I saw, I mean, they weren't Asian, but I saw people who like still looked like me and like sang the types of songs that I liked, like R&B and like hip hop and all those things. And I was like, oh my God, I can do this. And so I always had hoped that I could be someone for people in any of the shows that I've ever done, but especially in this show where I know that it's a thing and that we all in the cast get to do it together.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said so many times in this interview that I am just so thankful, but it's true. I can't stop saying it because it's true. I'm so thankful. I can't ask for much more. I'm so thankful for that.
And actually, quick question, like when you were in Mean Girls and you would go on for Kevin G, like, um, originated by Indian performers, and I remember hearing also that on the tour, Marcus Shane, they would like change the name because he's Korean. Like, what was that for you then?
They
If they
yeah,
did
they
that, yeah.
yeah, they did that. They did that on Broadway as well. Yeah, that was a thing on Broadway too. And when I was there, the other Kevin G understudy was also Filipino, my friend Daryl.
Oh
And so
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was the name. I can't remember what the first name was. The last name was Ganawan, so Kevin Ganawan. But Kevin is a nickname, so I
Yeah,
forget
yeah.
what the actual first name is because they only say it once during attendance in
Yeah,
that like
they just say the
really
one
into
time.
student would love. And then he's like, I'm going with Kevin this year. But the last name was Ganawan. So it would depend on who was going on, which was very like that was I thought that was great that they
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
It was also for Cheech, it was very important for him to be like an actual person who was Indian who was actually like portraying Kevin G. And so it was really cool for the rest of us as well that we didn't have to like pretend to be that whenever we were covering him.
yeah. And that's so
Um,
important. And I remember hearing Marcus Shane talk about that and how they changed the name to be Korean, and I was like, I
yeah.
had no idea because I'd only seen Cheech in anyway, but and so
Yeah,
like
I was never on tour when Marcus went on, so I don't know what his last name was, but yeah, we each had one.
yeah, no, that is so special too, to like have your first, Broadway experience be where you don't have to like push yourself into something that you're not. I mean, I know for me it's kind of that same thing of like I'm Taiwanese, what am I gonna do? Like there's not anything for me specifically really.
And yeah, and hopefully there will be, but like that's how I feel as a Filipino. It's like
Yeah,
we spent so much time like because like no one really could like unless people like knew Filipinos, like if you saw us, you probably wouldn't know that we were Filipino necessarily. And so like we so much of us spent our careers playing other ethnicities
yeah.
um because there was nothing for us. And that's what makes this even more special.
Yeah, I know so many of the cast has done, big productions too of like The King and I, even Jose and Conrad, too, and like Miss Saigon, and being able to see you all do your own stories now is
Um,
just so incredible. And a fun question, do you have a favorite Filipino food currently? Because there are so many good ones. I mean, I grew up eating Filipino food, um, just for fun, just with like our family friends and things like that. And right now I love like the grilled pork belly. Like that is my favorite thing. And the other day I was at a market trying to get pork belly, and they were like, "We're out," and I was like, "Are
like
you kidding
no,
me?" And so I got pork ribs, and that was so good. But I was wondering, what is your favorite currently? Just because it's so hard to choose.
there are so many things because Filipinos love to cook and love to eat and love to like have people eat. Like it's
Yeah,
very much a thing. Um, yes, I my favorite thing. Do you know what ube is?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love ube. And it's I literally have some in my fridge. Like I said, my mom visited like 2 weeks ago, and we have it's like a ube bread where
Mm.
pandesal is a type of like Filipino dinner roll, I guess you could
Yeah.
say.
Is it
Um,
the thing with the cheese on it? No, I forgot.
no, that's something
That's
else.
something else. I know I've had that, and there's ube of that too, or but
Yes, pandesal is just like the type of bread, but they make it or a type of it with like an ube filling in the center. And I love those. Because it's I mean, why wouldn't you? It's I love peanut butter and like I love having a PB&J. And so this kind of has like a similar consistency, but it's ube. So it's like I'm eating like
Mhm.
like ube sandwich, and it's amazing.
Oh, no, that's so great. I mean, I saw yesterday someone sent you guys food. Um,
Yeah,
like just
oh,
for just like a fan sending you all food to eat before
so
the
kind,
show.
yes. And a PSA to anyone who watches this, like you don't have to like send us lavish gifts like that, even though we'd be so thankful. But yes, that was so kind. And I think he had seen the show Saturday. And then he came back Sunday night. And like when I was at the stage tour, he's like, I'm the one who sent the food. And I was like, give me a hug. Like I was so thankful. We were also thankful. But yeah, I've worked in two little bathroom breaks for myself in the show. And if you see the show, you know how big a feat that is because we're running the entire time. We don't stop. So I
Yeah.
worked in two for myself because I'm have to use the restroom. Um, but for my second one, I like go all the way back up to my dressing room, and the our offstage covers were like laying out the food because it had already arrived, and it was like I think pancit palabok and some lumpia, and then a full like lechon, which is like a roasted pig.
Yeah, yeah.
Like hello, we were shocked. And then I, of course, still had half of the show to finish, so I was
You're
extra
just thinking
starving.
about it the whole show.
Yeah, I'd like seen all the food, I'd smelled all the food. I didn't have time to like even like get a taste because I had to like run back down. But yeah, that was very kind.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I was actually just telling Moses, I was like, someone has got to get a lechon inside of the Broadway theater. Because I was
it
like,
already happened. It
I know, I
happened.
was like, I
Yeah.
don't think that it ever happened. That has never happened before Here Lies Love, I'm
Oh,
sure.
I
So
know.
it's like, it's
Yes,
important
a
to
broad
do that. I mean, I
a
remember.
Broadway theater record. Yes,
Yeah, no, like growing up, I remember going to like those Filipino parties and you just see the big pig in the middle and you're like, yep, no,
yes.
it's just so,
This one was like a smaller one. Thank
yeah,
goodness. Oh my God, there are only so many of us in this building. Um, but yeah, it was so kind, so sweet.
I know.
Yeah.
You guys
We've
are
had, we've had
definitely
some,
well fed.
I mean, there's you, there's Aaliyah, but like we've had some really, not we've had, we have some really amazing fans, and like we are so thankful. My
Mm,
God, y'all are great. Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, the show is just, it brings people in. It's kind of how you feel when Filipino people kind of take care of you. It's like you feel taken care of and like you're
Yeah.
a part of something.
It,
Um,
it's the Filipino joy I was talking about.
yeah.
We want the audience to feel that because it's genuine from
Mhm.
us. So yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And how has your like relationship with your culture changed since being in Here Lies Love? Whether you had a strong relationship with it before or not, like just what was that journey for you finally, just being around Filipino people all the time because that doesn't
yeah,
usually happen unless it's like family.
yes, yeah, and that's what made it mainly it was for me growing up. So I am first generation American. Both of my parents immigrated from the Philippines. And I was lucky enough that I grew up with a good amount of family members on both sides of my family. So I had Filipinos everywhere when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Los Angeles where there are already a lot of Filipinos as well. And so that was a big part of my life. But even with that being said, again, I was an only child and first generation American. So when I finally got to school, I spoke both Tagalog and English at home, and honestly, more Tagalog even. So when I got to school, I had an accent, even though I was born here. And I felt like I knew more Tagalog words than I knew English words, and I got made fun of for my accent. And so, especially I mentioned earlier that I was a very shy kid. I I stopped speaking Tagalog cold turkey. I was like, I have to go to school. I don't want to get made fun of. I I'm just gonna speak English. I'm American. Like I'm like literally like it was so important for me to fit in.
Mhm.
And that kind of continued as I like went through growing up. And as I became an adult, I had more of an appreciation for my culture. But by that point, like I still can understand Tagalog pretty fluently, not as well as I could when I was like around it all the time growing up.
Hmm.
But I can't really speak it anymore, which is unfortunate. It's because especially when I went away to college, like the, I would not usually be around Filipinos anywhere. But being a part of this cast has been wonderful because it's felt like a I don't know, like a reawakening of my culture inside of me. Um, like we all did our like history learning and research as a part of the show, but I know that myself and like a lot of others of us have like done our own like research on our own outside of the show. We've like been talking to our parents more about our culture. Um, a lot of us either speak Tagalog in the theater or like throw it into conversation here and there. Or at least the very least, like we hear other people talking it. Like it 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 feels like being like wrapped up in my culture again, like I was when I was a kid. And there are jokes that we make that I have to stop myself sometimes from making outside of the theater because I'm like, oh yeah, that's like kind of like a specific Filipino thing. You wouldn't get it. But it's just so it's so cool. It's not something that I thought that I would be able to embrace as much as I have again in my adult life, even though it's something that I've wanted to do more recently. I just never had the space to do it, and now I do. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, no, that is so great. I know I've been trying to like do that too of just trying to be more immersed in my culture because I don't speak Mandarin. I wish I did. I never went to like Chinese school as a kid, and at first I was like so happy. I was like, oh, I don't have to go, but because other people did. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I had, or I wish I had that foundation of
Yeah,
language because it would have been, easier to communicate with some family members. Most of my family members are from born and raised here, but of just that depth that you can't have unless you know the language, of just really knowing what it means to be, you're a said culture and said ethnicity. It's like language is such a thing too of it's cool that Tagalog is being spoken all the time and on Broadway. Like just the
yeah,
fact that that's being done, like that's such a little, you would think it's more of a little thing, but it's like it's so major in that usually people wouldn't have the space or the ability to do that in different companies unless everyone was Filipino. Um, and just the difference in that and yeah, just the uniqueness in it too.
yeah,
Um,
it's so unique. And to
yeah.
get to do it like not even in just like a um what's the word I'm looking for? Not even in just a like leisurely activity kind of way. Like I get to go to work and feel so culturally seen. It's wonderful. Yeah. And I know how rare that is, so I don't take it for granted.
Yeah, yeah. And what is, if you have advice that you would say to young Filipino people or just Asian people in general, young kids who want to pursue performing, like what is your advice to them?
Oh my gosh. Um, I think the main thing that comes to mind is that it is possible and you can do it. Um, I feel like I guess I can speak for myself. Like growing up as a young Filipino Asian kid, like so much of my identity was wrapped in you know um, doing well in school and in all these like stereotypes that I felt like um put me and my future in like a box or like on a certain track of like, oh, like this is what like I'm supposed to do type of thing. Um, and I'm so happy that I had parents who were open to me not having to do that. I had mentioned that my mom's a nurse and she loves her job. And I grew up with her coming home and just like regaling anyone who would listen about like how her shift was. And I grew up watching watching someone do something they loved so much for a living. And that was part of the reason why I decided to take a chance on acting and performing is like, well, like I know I could pick something that is probably more stable and like probably has more opportunities for me and all these things, but I want to do something that I'm that passionate about and that I love that much. And I'm so thankful that I mean, it took a little bit of convincing, but I'm so thankful that eventually my parents were like, sure, like, let's go for it.
Yeah.
And so for any other young Asian person who's maybe going through the same dilemma or the same choice of like, do I do something that's expected of me and that's perhaps safer, or do I do something that I know I enjoy, that I know I'm good at, that I know brings me joy? I'd say to like allow yourself to take the risk, allow yourself to follow that passion, allow yourself to do something that's not what is quote unquote expected of you, because that is such a big thing in the culture, is to like there are so many expectations in place for young people in many different aspects of life. And I know that that's an important thing, and like culture is something that should still be respected, but at the same time, we are all our own individual humans, and we deserve to be happy, and we deserve to not have to do things just because that's the way they've always been done, or that's because that's what our parents expected of us, or and the list goes on. But
Yeah.
I would say that if there's something that you want to do, it's possible to do it, and you should take a chance on yourself because you're worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Such great advice. And lastly, like, what does representation mean to you?
Uh, um, I mean, representation is everything. I think representation means feeling seen and means not feeling alone and not feeling like there's no one that understands you. And that's why I think art can be so important in so many different aspects and genres of art,
Yeah.
because I think it's really common for people to feel like they're an other or feel like they are someone who is different from everyone around them and that no one gets them and that no one understands like what they're going through. And um I think that there is always someone who understands, there is always someone who cares. It's just sometimes difficult to see that. And so when you see someone on TV or on stage, or you see a piece of visual art or anything that speaks to you and you see yourself in that, it is so affirming and freeing and encouraging and comforting, all of the words that just kind of add up to you not feeling alone. Um, and that's why I think representation is so important in so many aspects of the word, whether that's seeing queer representation or body positivity representation or cultural representation, like all of these things, like it's so important to see people who are like you because it shows you that you're not alone in the world. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's I actually wrote my college essay about representation, and actually the quote I used at the beginning was by Conrad, um,
What
which
was
is
it?
he said it in like some thing they did on like Playbill where they went to all the talked to all the Asian people. This was when he was in Little Shop, which is where I met him. And he said, yeah, representation matters to me because when you see yourself, you feel like you belong. And then I like wrote it down. I took that. I was like, I'm gonna use this always. And just yeah, it's that feeling of like you don't have to try to like push yourself into something. You just feel like that's a part of who you are and that's celebrated too. And I think Here Lies Love is doing that for so many people, of just letting them be seen and going to see it and then being seen by it. um I think what the show is really, really doing. And I love that you guys are doing like talkbacks with the Filipino community. It's like you're
Uh,
finding your audience and really centering in on that. And that's important because Broadway, usually Filipino people are not the first people to go and see a Broadway show, maybe. Like, and so Here Lies Love is opening up that time, and then it might make people who want to go back or go see a different show or go see more Filipinos in different works of art on Broadway or any.
or other cultures telling their own stories on
Yeah,
Broadway, you know?
yeah,
Like I feel like it's been like especially with like how unfortunate how unfortunately short the run of K-pop was on Broadway. I feel like it can be really difficult for such culturally specific shows to be commercially viable on Broadway, which shouldn't be the case, you know, like there should be room for all different types of art and all different types of stories to be told. And so I mean, that really made me sad when that happened. And I'm hoping that with Here Lies Love and with other shows that come to Broadway, hopefully, that are also talking about specific cultures and histories and all these things that might not be like the mainstream norm, that that this can show that there is a place for all of that as well, even on Broadway.
yeah, definitely. I've been saying a lot too, is like the more specific the story, the more universal it really does feel. Um,
Yeah,
which is such a weird thing to think about, but it's true. I mean, a strange loop, that's so specific, but people were feeling seen by that. And Here Lies
yeah.
Love and K-pop and all of those that are really, Idomo, it's like things are happening where it's these such specific stories that are really being universally accepted too. Just as a good story. That's what our job, our job is as performers. We're telling a story, and to be telling an authentic story, that is definitely something that's not usually done, but definitely something that needs to be done more.
No,
Definitely. Yeah.
100%. And it, especially if people like give shows like that a chance, like people could think like, oh, I don't know why I would like this, but if you go and you give it a chance and then you do see yourself in it, I um I wrote this on my website that like art is a way to like for people to like see the world in a different way. But especially if you go and see something where you're not expecting to see yourself, and then you do see yourself and you relate to someone or a story that's so different from you, and yet you're still relating to it, you're like, huh, maybe we're not so different. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that builds more community, builds more understanding. Like that's why I feel like stories do need to not just always be like the same like different variations of the same thing. Like we should be telling authentic and different stories because that's how we can all see that we're all not actually that different, you know?
No, it invokes empathy in other people where they might not have realized it by just seeing an experience that is different from theirs. And then if it is your experience, then you feel so included. It's kind of that like, you get something from it if you're, white, or if you're a different ethnicity from, Filipino with Here Lies Love. But if you're Filipino, you'll be seen through your family history and through your personal connection with it. And just the incredible meaning that has been with the show for so long, and the fact that it's finally being seen by everyone is so great. Um,
Hmm.
and Erin, how can everyone, who will be listening, like follow you kind of on either social media or just in other things that you're doing? Just how can we all support you?
Yeah, well, come see Here Lies Love. It's a great time, I promise. Um, and you won't regret coming. But you can also follow me on Instagram at Aaron Reads.
Perfect. Everyone go.
And like that's like Aaron reads a book. Most people think it's my last name. I'm just a nerd and I love to read. So
Yeah,
yes,
it's fun. It's
yeah.
definitely. I think I definitely was confused the first time I saw it. I was like, huh? Oh, okay, okay. I see what
You're
you're
not
creating.
alone. Yes. You're not alone.
But yeah, just can everyone continue to support Aaron and Here Lies Love, and just make sure you go see it because it's not something that you want to miss. You want to be able to say years later, like I saw the original
Here
Broadway
Lies Love.
production of Here
Yeah,
Lies Love, and that's your like little brag for people, when years later. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, thank you so much for listening to Broadway Corner with Ashley Hall. Make sure to follow Aaron at Aaron Reads. Go see Here Lies Love. Support live theater. Support Broadway. There are options if it's financially hard for you. If you want to do rush tickets, $35 for Here Lies Love. It's definitely the way to go
Yes.
to see the show. And so make sure you don't miss out. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. You've been listening to Broadway Corner with Ashley Haw. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time.